Happy Halloween, everybody.
Hello there. Welcome to my review of Joe Dante's Gremlins 2 as part of my Halloween sequel series. While some people argue the original Gremlins is not technically a horror film, it scared me when I was a kid, so I'm counting it. The sequel is definitely not a horror. It's a silly, pop culture filled live action Looney Tune comedy that makes fun of its own premise. It manages to be prescient as well as satirizing the time it was made. It features Dante's regular acting troupe in various roles, including Dick Miller returning as Murray Futterman, despite seemingly having perished in the previous film. The plot sees Mr. Wing dying and his shop being demolished to make way for the latest Daniel Clamp development.
The death of Mr. Wing removes the last obstacle to developer Daniel Clamp's long-delayed Chinatown project.
Clamp is played by John Glover, and was originally created as a satire of a certain type of New York entrepreneur and property developer that Dante had and still has a particular distaste for. However, Glover is so charming and naive as Clamp that he is impossible not to like, as he excitedly tries to do his best.
But that's the tricky part, sir. You'll have to take care of that.
Me?
Yes, sir. You'll have to set it up from the outside.
Oh, good. I finally get to use my secret exit.
Gizmo escapes the destruction but is quickly captured by twin scientists Martin and Lewis. As I said, this film is filled with pop culture references. They take Gizmo back to their lab, which happens to be housed in Clamp Tower, which also happens to be where Zach Galligan's Billy Peltzer and Phoebe Cates' Kate Berenger also work, having moved to New York together. The inevitable happens, and Gizmo gets wet, causing him to spawn much more vicious mogwai, who, unchecked, eat after midnight, become gremlins, and wreak havoc in Clamp Towers, mutating thanks to mad scientist Dr. Catheter, played by Christopher Lee, and planning to take on the city of New York, with only Billy and his small troupe of eccentric colleagues to stop them. The film came in for a lot of criticism on release because it was so overtly comedic and silly, critics seemingly unaware of the slightly more toned-down comedy in the first film. I can't understand that criticism if you know anything of Dante's work, or if you enjoyed the first film, as it really is an extension of that with Dante fully off the leash. It really is the natural thing to do for what is too flimsy a premise to make a straight sequel of, without it feeling like a retread. The fact it starts with an introduction by Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck really should tell you all you need to know about the tone. Beyond the quirky tone, there's also a lot of social commentary that Dante regularly injects into his work. Really, from the very beginning, when we transition to the skyscrapers of modern day, in 1990 New York, to the older parts of the city, the smaller, brick-built and now downtrodden parts that are slowly being demolished in the name of progress. The film is not critiquing the need for progress, but that sometimes the cost of being ever forward-looking is that you don't see what you've lost along the way. This is a theme that comes up repeatedly in the film, as the ultra-modern, technologically advanced Clamp Tower is filled with glitching technology, which only gets worse with the arrival of the Gremlins. Gremlins originally being a character of modern folklore that caused new technology to fail, it makes sense that they are attracted to Clamp Tower's unique futuristic construction. Clamp's version of progress also ignores the people who have to use it, or at least coexist with the technology. As we see, all the decorative plants in Clamp Tower have been sprayed silver, and the tour guides are forced to wear unwieldy hats with a replica of the tower on it. It's even referred to as a smart building, long before that terminology became part of the cultural lexicon.
The Clamp Center is the most advanced smart building in America.
We get a peek behind the curtain of the sort of targets Dante is aiming at when Robert Prosky's aging horror host, Grandpa Fred, laments to Billy that Clamp won't let him show any black and white films on the Clamp cable network, only colour ones, which is a clear dig at Ted Turner's colorization of old movies that faced immediate backlash and was a massive failure around this time. It also takes a swipe at the changing world of working practices, when Robert Picardo's security chief patrols the offices, ensuring no cubicle is adorned with any personal items or pictures, as the building has been decorated with soulless corporate art.
Unauthorized potted plant.
It might have seemed over the top at the time, and yet modern business practices of hot desking have ensured that you don't even have a cubicle of your own, let alone the chance to have any personal items there. Billy's desk even has a light that goes off if you stay still for too long, something I'm sure those of you who work in modern offices will be familiar with. The main plot neatly navigates its way through the satire, stopping only to make self-referential swipes, such as when an incredulous employee, played by Dante regular Archie Han, is questioning the 3 Mogwai rules, something which I know people did poke holes in, only for a gremlin to attack him.
What if they're eating in an airplane and they cross a time zone? I mean, it's always midnight somewhere.
Not only laughing at the expense of the inherent silliness of the rules, but also at the kind of people who think they're smart for applying real-world standards to a movie rather than enjoy the movie on its own merits. The movie is telling certain members of the audience, of course, that the rules don't matter under any sort of scrutiny. But does that one small problem ruin the film? Of course not. And you aren't clever for spotting it because everybody spotted it, so watch out or a gremlin might come for you. There's a similar scene where Leonard Maltin is reviewing the VHS of the first film, and when he gives it a less than favourable review, he's attacked by gremlins, further suggesting that if you take any of this too seriously, this isn't the film for you. It's remarkable how many different types of jokes the film manages to squeeze in, as well as the sheer number of jokes. So to nitpick why the bright studio lights in the cable TV division doesn't bother the gremlins would seem really churlish. The real masterstroke for me, though, is the pop culture jokes that just weren't as prevalent a feature at the time this was made as they are today. Having one gremlin made smart thanks to a brain potion from the genetics lab, then having Tony Randall voice him,
Talk a little bit about what's going on in this room.
seemingly just to build up to a joke where he dresses like Frank Sinatra to sing New York, New York is one thing.
Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today.
But to have another receive an intravenous sunblock and bat DNA in order to make this Batman joke just shows the level of commitment they have to crafting the humour to hit on different levels. To have the camera pan in on one of the most famous Dracula actors and his subtle twitch when the Bat Gremlin is revealed is the kind of detail only a filmmaker who is also a film fan puts in. The one big question, though, is whether this is a horror film, or is it just a flat-out comedy? And I would argue it is still a horror film of sorts, as it does have genuinely scary parts to it and horror elements. When the gremlins turn truly violent, they can be pretty terrifying. Some of the gremlin deaths are pretty horrific, and the attack on Billy's boss, Marla, by the spider gremlin really creeps me out. That thing is truly horrific. I think this is another great sequel, arguably better than the first, but I would suggest watching the first film first in order to appreciate some of the jokes in this one. I also think this is a great film to watch with friends at Halloween, as it's a lot of fun with a few scares that should keep everyone happy. The most important lesson to take from this film, though, is don't mess with Murray Futterman.
Don't mess with Murray Futterman.
Thank you. Goodbye.